I'm Lannan, he's Giles, and today I'm going to talk about newspapers that we're seeing fewer print editions and also the most important sentence ever written. So, Duncan, what do you have?
What I've got today is going to be talking about college football playoffs, some interesting things there, and what we did over our Christmas and New Year's break that I think people will find entertaining.
Coming up on Unscripted. Welcome to Unscripted, a podcast with no script by design. We're not following a plan, and that's exactly the point. This show is about whatever's on the minds of your hosts, Larry Lannan and Duncan Giles. We'll dig into what's happening in the world, and just as importantly, what isn't making headlines this week. So, with that, let's get started. The conversation could go anywhere because we go wherever the microphones take us. Here's Larry Lannan and Duncan Giles. Today is the second day of 2026. I can say that for the first time on the podcast, 2026. It is the second day of January, a Friday. So welcome back, Duncan Giles.
Thanks, Larry. It's always good to be here.
Lots to talk about today. We not only finished an old year, we got a brand new year coming up and plenty of news to talk about. I spent a lot of time with family and friends over the holiday. In fact, all three of my grandchildren and a lot of families in my home right now. You may hear some mayhem in the background, but they're just young people having fun. My grandkids are 1, 2, and 5, so you know something about that age. So they're all just having a good time being together. So, Duncan, I understand you did some traveling for the holiday.
Yeah, and this is going to be quite the interesting long story, so we'll have to bear with us here. With my wife, my beautiful wife Kim, and I, the last couple of years have decided to make our Christmas present traveling instead of, giving gifts to each other and staying home. So this year we went first to the Gaylord Hotel in Nashville. And for those who've never been there, it is quite the experience. The drive to Nashville from Indianapolis is not bad at all. I'm sure it's convenient to many Midwest and Southern locations. Then we also, want to talk about the actual atmosphere there. This is like I said, it's hard to describe. It's 2,800 rooms, millions of square feet of convention space. But the interesting thing is inside they have a 9,000 acre, or not, 9,000 acres. That'd be a little much. 9-acre basically gardens. And what we did was booked an atrium room, a room that overlooked the atrium. And so we could sit out on a balcony and overlook all this. They've got 9,000 panes of glass in the ceiling. So you feel like you're outside, even if you're inside. We didn't really spend much time outside except for a carriage ride, which is Kim's first carriage ride, and we found wonderful. Then we like to go to water parks and enjoy lazy rivers. So for 2 days, we went to their water park there, enjoyed the lazy river. Now, I will tell you that lazy rivers should have either rules or something of that nature. When you have kids stopping in the middle, it's bad. When you have adults stopping in the middle of it, especially when there's a current, it's worse. It's sort of like human bumper cars. And I will say that not only did I smash into some walls, but I did smash into some people that were feeling unawares.
So, where were the traffic cops?
Exactly. You need traffic cops. There were lifeguards there, but they weren't doing anything aside from their lifeguard duties. But one time I did hit a wall pretty hard because you're basically in these lazy rivers have quite a bit of current. So you're at the mercy of the current when it's zooming past you. And, make sure you have tight fitting swimsuits because sometimes the jets there can try and let you show partial moons to folks, if you want to say that. But yeah, I bumped into one time a wall pretty hard. I thought it was a wall. Kim informed me later we were going together and basically pulling each other so we could try and avoid things. Uh, a young girl apparently was clinging to the wall and then decided right at the moment that Kim had avoided us to step out. So apparently I smacked her pretty good. I do not recall this. It felt like I smashed the wall. Apparently I hit her. But I just was one of those things where we came back around. There was no blood on the wall. There was no kid plastered on the wall. There was nobody crying. So I assumed I didn't damage her at all.
So
Uh,
that's your
rest,
story and you're sticking to it, right?
exactly. Exactly. There's no proof that I did any harm, nothing of that nature. But really, the restaurants there were incredible. They had an incredible Italian restaurant. Christmas Day, we had a buffet breakfast that was very, very nice. It was at their steakhouse, and they limited the number of people per hour that could go in there. So it made it for a very nice experience. You weren't wall to wall with people fighting at the buffet line. You had the choice of what you wanted to eat and didn't have to worry about that. Um, then after a couple of days there, 3 nights there, and again, you go there, and I know you and I have talked off camera about this. The Gaylord can be pricey, but you go there expecting it to be that, but it's a good value. It's sort of like people who like to go to Disney World. Like Larry, I know you and your family like to go to Disney World and enjoy that. That's very pricey, but you feel you get a value for that. With the Gaylord, we felt we got a good value.
Well, I got to tell you something. I've only been to Opryland in its current configuration once, and that was for a business meeting, which obviously wasn't going to be as much fun, right? And I did expect things to be pricier than usual because you're in an enclosed space. You're in one area. You can't just, it's not easy to get in your car and go to a 5 and 10 cent store. So whatever you want to buy is going to be more expensive. It was just way expensive, even way beyond the definition of pricier. And I didn't get to do any of the fun stuff because we were having business meetings the whole time. So I get the restaurants were fine; they were expensive, but I guess I just had a completely different experience. And the one I think is sad, Duncan, you haven't said a word about going to the Grand Ole Opry.
That's because we didn't. We literally did not go anywhere outside of the hotel aside from a carriage ride because it's like a self-contained entertainment space. We spent most of our time in the lazy river. We did a lot of walking around. The gardens were quite beautiful. We took a boat ride. They have a 12-minute boat ride in there in a self-contained river that they have, and it showed all the decorations that they've got up, things of that nature, and it was just a great experience. So especially for the holidays, we thought it was a very nice place to do, place to go. And like I say, we didn't even see any place else other than Nashville. And then we took off to visit friends in Florida and had the always fun, ever present Atlanta traffic on I-75. And for those who haven't experienced it, I would urge you not to.
It's one of the hardest cities to drive. And I'm not driven in Washington, D.C., one of the toughest cities in which to drive in America, and it's no picnic. Atlanta is a whole different thing, whether you're driving around town or just driving on the interstate through town, just assume you're going to be stopped for a while.
Yeah, and it can be a long while for us. We were like, okay, we left Nashville, so I figured, okay, we're going to be okay. We'll hit early afternoon. Shouldn't be too bad. Well, of course it was. And from 30 miles outside of Atlanta to darn near Macon, Georgia, which is about 50 miles away, it was very slow, wall to wall traffic. It took a couple of hours to do that. It was just a horrible experience, but we made it down to Florida, spent a night in a nice hotel, and then we're able to go down a little bit further down south of Orlando to visit with a couple of great friends, the Andy and Aaron Reitmeyer. Andy has been on our previous incarnation of our show and just had a great time spending time with them. Um, had an interesting experience our first night. Went to an Italian restaurant. Restaurant was very nice. Our waitress was quite interesting. I say that because having spent some time in my youth in the restaurant and bar business, I've heard just about everything. This waitress proceeded to tell us as our meal went on, and she felt apparently very comfortable with us. She must have felt extremely comfortable with us because she was telling us that on New Year's Eve, she's still living with her ex-boyfriend, who's now got a girlfriend, but she is going to invite, because she goes both ways, she is going to invite 3 of her girlfriends over and, quote, put on a show, unquote, for her ex-boyfriend just to make him jealous. This was something that was not expected for dinner conversation.
I've always found that Florida, and I spent a lot of time in Florida. My in-laws used to have property down there. We would go down there several times a year when they still own property on the Panhandle. I think Florida is just a different place.
It is, and this woman, this young lady, was very forthright. Then after explaining, and I did not go into near the detail that she did. And again, we're 2 couples sitting there at the end of it, and of course I'm kidding around with her because everybody else is just stunned. I've heard this kind of stuff before in the restaurant and bar business, not usually to customers, but usually it's talked among restaurant staff. She told me to put out my hand. Now, at this point, I'm a little concerned about what might happen. And she placed a sucker in my hand. And, she said, "This is for you." And then proceeded to give out one for everybody else at the table. We were a little bit leery of what might be in the sucker or on the sucker. So we chose not to avail ourselves of that sucker.
Well, at least I'm glad you were able to get to some warm weather
yeah,
and some
it
nice
was an
enclosed
interesting
space for
experience.
your holiday travels. And it sounds like you had a good time. I was just thinking, Duncan. When you look back on 2025, we started the year in a completely different place a year ago. You were still the president of a local and federal employee union. I was still a retired guy. And we were doing a podcast about once a week that we had established several years. I think 2020 we started that podcast, and then it morphed into what we're doing today. So a lot has changed in 2025 for both of us, and I can say it was a good year. Would you not say that?
Yeah, and part of the fun for me was, as many folks know, I retired officially on 9/30, September 30th. And I would go on the OPM website and check to see if there's been any update on my status, on my retirement status, things of that nature. Nothing doing during the Christmas vacation. Christmas Day, I go into our bank account as I do daily to see if there are any bills coming up. Do I need to move any money around? I have a pending payment from OPM for civil service. It is a Christmas miracle. I actually started getting a I got a payment from OPM, a partial annuity, and in fact, a quite good one. It looked like for 2 months for something, and it's still to this day on OPM shows I have no application on file. So
Well, and just to explain to people who don't understand what we're going through as federal retirees, you've been through not just a gigantic slashing of staff at almost all federal agencies, OPM, the one that handles retirees being one of them, but also went through a lengthy government shutdown, I think the longest yet. And here we are in the holiday season, and you're already starting to see a payment. That's a Christmas story, Duncan. That's all I
yeah,
can say.
it really is, because there are an awful lot of folks out there who are still looking for their annual leave payout. much less something from that. Two more things I want to bring up about our trip. First off, we had made the commitment to each other that we're never going through Atlanta again. So there are two other routes from Florida you can get back to the Midwest. You can go through the Carolinas and then jet over, or you can go through Alabama. So we decided to go over through Alabama. It's supposedly an hour longer. I'm betting because of the traffic in Atlanta, it didn't cost us any more time. We were going to take 2 days anyway. I would highly, highly recommend if you're leaving Florida to go I-10 and then up to I-65 in Alabama, because it is a much, much, much easier drive. Being said, our last night on the road, we stayed in Decatur, Alabama, which is just west of Huntsville, off the interstate, and stayed at a place that let's see, it's by the Tilton, rhymes with Tilton, Homes for Suite, let's call it that. When we checked in, we had been driving about 10 hours. We get to the room, first room, tried to open it with a key card, doesn't go. Go back to the desk. Okay, well, the battery must be dead on the key card or on the door. So I'll switch it to another room on a different floor. So I had to go back up, and I had gone down and told Kim, okay, now we've got to move all the luggage to another floor. So we go into that room. Kim pulls down the bedspread, and there are materials all over the sheets. We weren't sure what the materials were. We didn't want to know what the materials were. Go back down, and the receptionist, who was very nice, the staff was very nice at this particular place, at this particular Tilton property, said, oh, there was a customer there who had their own blanket. That must have been from the blanket, and the housekeeping apparently didn't make up the room. Great. So now we're going to be switched to a third room on a different floor. So again, we move all our luggage to this first floor room. The door opens, we get in. We were so tired at this point, we just wanted to collapse. There were tiles falling off of the floor, adjacent to the floor, duct tape on the shower. The room was not cleaned well, and it smelled musty, like nobody had been in this room for quite a while. So if you're ever in Decatur, Alabama, we would strongly recommend that you do not stay at a Tilton property, Homes for Suites. If I was Tilton, I would be ashamed that our name was attached to this particular property, because it was bad.
Yeah, Duncan, I think the worst story I can tell about traveling was when I was actually doing some travel as a union official and went to Baltimore. Downtown Baltimore, I went to my room and there was another family in the room.
Yeah, that's always fun. I've done that when you check in and
Yeah,
you either go in there and somebody's there, or somebody's trying to come into a room you're in.
that was probably the worst experience I've had. Uh, you'd mentioned Atlanta more than once. I want to talk about Atlanta now because Atlanta has a newspaper that's been around for 157 years. That's the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. As we enter 2026, something very important is about to happen there. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution published its very last print edition on December 31st, 2025. That newspaper will no longer be a print newspaper. It will be the only major U.S. city with no daily printed newspaper. Some cities have newspapers, maybe they're printed not every single day, but in Atlanta, and that's a big city, no printed newspaper for the main large newspaper in that city. Now, at one time, the Journal Constitution had over 500,000 print editions they would sell every day. That number went down to about 40,000.
Oh,
And that's why they went strictly online. You and I live in the Indianapolis area, Duncan. We still have a print newspaper every day, though it's getting a lot more expensive to subscribe to the print edition. If you look at the Indianapolis Star, if you go back to the year 2000, the Indianapolis Star printed 363,000 print editions a day. And as best anybody can estimate it, right now, the Indianapolis Star prints about 24,000 print editions a day. As a kid who grew up reading newspapers to the point where I was such a small kid, I would lay the newspaper on the floor and I would get newsprint on my elbows trying to read a newspaper. I hate to see it happen, but it is a sign of the times. The print newspapers are, whether we like it or not, are slowly but surely going away.
Yeah, and the Atlanta Constitution, as you well know, is a very, very, very well respected newspaper. They've done a lot of investigative stuff over the years and had a strong staff. So it is sad to see that. For the Indianapolis Star, as a digital subscriber, I totally understand, and I used to love the Sunday, the Sunday newspaper, where Sunday Star, where I could get the sports section, take a look at batting averages and things of that nature during baseball season. But yeah, everybody wants their form now electronic, and it is killing the print editions. And it's just one of those things where, we are marching forward for better or worse.
One thing that's happening in 2026, Duncan, is as Americans, we are celebrating the 250th birthday of our nation. And we consider the birth of our nation to be the Declaration of Independence, when we officially declared our independence from England, which of course then led to the Revolutionary War that lasted for several years. But a man named Walter Isaacson has written books about famous Americans, all the way from Ben Franklin all the way up to Elon Musk. He told a funny story once that he met Elon Musk at a party and pitched him on the idea of writing a book about him. And he just kind of stood there and listened and nodded his head and walked away. He said, 10 minutes later, somebody said, "Oh, I see you're writing a book on Elon Musk." He said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "He just got on Twitter and said that you're about to write a book about him." And Isaacson hadn't even got the go-ahead from it. I guess that's an Elon. But Isaacson's most recent book is the most important sentence ever written. So, Duncan, what do you think he considers the most important sentence ever written in the history of mankind?
That is a great question.
Well, I won't put you on the spot. So here it is. To him, it's the second sentence of the Declaration of Independence. And we've all read it, but I'm going to read it again just to remind everybody what it says. "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." One thing that Isaacson found, he went back into the National Archives and found something that I was the Library of Congress, National Archives. He found this, and it's something that a lot of historians just never unearthed, that the Declaration of Independence was written by Ben Franklin, John Adams, and Thomas Jefferson. And Jefferson is given the credit for writing it mostly. But in the first draft, I see it because he crossed it out and changed it on the draft itself, that in the original draft of the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson, instead of self-evident, said sacred and undeniable. So he basically had said that instead of self-evident, he had written sacred and undeniable. Franklin crossed that out and put self-evident in the draft. That's what ended up being in the final draft. He did that because he thought that the Declaration of Independence should be grounded in the nation's rights in reason, and this was a reflection of the era of enlightenment that we saw in Europe, that it should be based on Enlightenment science and not a religious dictate, which, by the way, most of those founding fathers were not terribly religious people, and to the extent they were deists. They were not Christians. They believed in a God, but didn't believe that God intervened in our lives, that we should pray to a God, because God created us and He's basically there to leave us alone, and that was the end of it. That was their view
Right.
of
The vast
religion
majority. Yep.
to the extent that they had any religious beliefs. And it was Jefferson that tried to put his deist faith into some of this. And Franklin said, no, let's base it on science, enlightenment, and reason. So to Walter Isaacson, that was, um, to him, the most important sentence ever written. And I think he says that because, and it's hard for us today to understand this, what a radical document that was at that time in history in the world. The world was mostly ruled by monarchs. They had some elected bodies like the British Parliament, but it was the monarchs that had final say over just about everything. And the idea that the pursuit of happiness would be part of what a declaration should say is a totally new concept. So to him, that was the most important sentence ever written. I'm not sure if that's entirely true, but it certainly is one of the most important, would you not say?
Yeah, I would say that. I think there's some American bias there just because of the fact that, you've got things like the Magna Carta, people would say the Bible, the Torah, the Quran, things of that nature. They may build up with that. But, I totally think that is a very, very important sentence, especially in the context of history. I would definitely put it up there. If it's not the most important, it's got to be one of the most important, like you said, because it was such a radical idea at the time. And, you hear somebody saying it's a beautiful document and it's a document of unity. No, no, it's really not a document of unity. It was a declaration that, we are independent. That's the Declaration of Independence. That's exactly what it means. And so for that type of document, and then to go into, that evolved into our system that we have today, where, we could have had a monarch. They basically wanted George Washington to rule the country, and he said, no, we need a system for the people, by the people. That was originally the idea was originally put forth in the Declaration of Independence.
And the fact that a man who helped write that declaration said all men are created equal owned 400 slaves. So there are all sorts of
Yeah.
contradictions and that are in that document. So and I don't, well, we can get in more deeply into that. Let's move into what we do every time we do this podcast, the news stories that did not make the mainstream media. The In Michigan, there's a university, the Lake Superior State University. Every year, they list words that should be banished in the next year, which is not a bad idea. So they have their 2025 list of words and phrases that should be banished for 2026. Guess what made the top of the list?
6, 7.
6, 7. You bingo, you win. Now, what
Oh,
does
excuse me. Wait. I've been told by Kim 6, 7.
okay?
You have to have the hand motion.
I hear it. I know about it. I don't know what it means. Nobody, you really can't explain it. Some people say it means cooked. That's the best definition it can come from. So basically, this university says that 6, 7 should be cooked for 2026. Let's just put that behind us. But there were other words on that list: demure, incentivize, perfect, gift or gifted, my bad, reach out. And by the way, my bad and reach out were also on the lists twice in the 1990s. So some of these come back after years of being off the list.
Yeah. Well, some of them, last year's big word was skibbity. Skibbity should be stricken from the list too, because it means about the same as 6, 7. And again, I will do the hand motions.
By the way, Duncan, do you realize that the U.S. government has just now recently produced their final 3 pennies? America will stop making pennies. So the final 3 1-cent pennies have been produced by the government. So guess what they did with them? They sold them at auction.
Of course they did.
So, what do you think these final three 1 cent pennies produced by the U.S. government sold for at auction?
I have no idea.
According to Shepherd Express, a news site, $800,000. You get the
That's ridiculous.
you get three pennies, the dies that were used to strike them. The auctioneer who did this, he's been doing auctions for 40 years. He said it's something he's never seen before.
I'd like to know.
$800,000.
Yeah, I'd like to know where the proceeds are going to for that auction.
I don't know if we know who the auction who made you. So that's not always released
Yeah,
publicly.
exactly. Yeah, I think we know where this is going to benefit some way, either directly or indirectly, and it's not the U.S. government.
Well, Duncan, the last thing I'm going to talk about, you can add some things later if you want. Anybody who lives in the state of Indiana knows that Indiana University is known athletically first and foremost for being a basketball state. We've had great soccer teams, even our diving teams, have been world champion, would produce world champions, Olympian swimming teams, that kind of thing. So we've had some great Indiana University athletics teams that have made history. I think this football team IU has put together. You know what I think about when I think of the IU football team, and I hate to say it, I think of the play musical "Damn Yankees," and I wonder who sold their soul to the devil to get IU as far as they have. That's a joke, okay? It's just something that came to mind. It's that unbelievable that Indiana University is now one of the final four teams in the playoff system to decide who the national champion will be for college football. And who would have seen this coming just 3 years ago?
No one, absolutely freaking no one. Yeah, you've got to give the credit to Coach Signetti, who is such an interesting individual. Uh, Reminds a lot of people of latter day Bobby Knight in his attitude, his statements, his way he talks to the press and things of that nature. I just love watching his expressions on the sidelines because the man can be up 4 touchdowns and he is not happy. He is just not happy at all. But it's absolutely astounding what he, his staff, the players, and as he talks about, the players that have transferred in, whether he had former players from James Madison or like the Heisman Trophy winner Mendoza transferred in. They're people of good character. He said they're strong leaders as well as great football players, and he said that makes all the difference.
I think the thing about the IU football team that people don't always talk about enough is the fact that there are no 4 or 5 star recruits on that
Yep.
team. What Signetti does, he says, give me a young man with great athletic ability and potential. Give me a man who's willing to make himself better and wants to make himself better and is willing to be coached. He said, I can make that player a better player. And Mendoza is a great example. He sat on the bench at Cal when he was at Berkeley. He didn't play and came to IU, and now he's a star. That's the formula that IU has put together, and look for other universities to do the same.
Yeah, but it's very tough to replicate that. As IU's tried to do that, replicate that formula for decades, and hasn't been able to. The amazing thing to me, one of the amazing things to me is the college football playoffs. The 4 games that we had over the last couple of days, didn't get a chance to watch the one on New Year's Eve between Ohio State and Miami, but watched the other 3 games. And the folks who had the bye, the teams that had the bye, except for the 3 out of the 4, lost. The higher seeds who had the bye, who were rested, lost. Indiana had a bad first series. Mendoza gets sacked twice, but then it's like, okay, now we've got the rust shaken off. We're moving forward, and proceeded to annihilate a decent, not great, but a decent Alabama team. Give them their worst bowl loss they've ever had. And so I think that speaks a lot to Signetti where he could actually do that. The game last night between Mississippi and Georgia was an all-time classic, including the wild and wacky finish with some calls that you just sat there and that, really? You missed that one, but you called that? Okay, whatever. But it's going to be a very interesting Final Four. You've got Indiana going against Oregon again, this time in a neutral site. And it's tough to beat a team twice in 1 year, so Indiana's going to have their hands full. And then you've got Miami and Ole Miss, which is going to be basically who knows what you're going to get out of that game. So it's very interesting.
Well, Duncan, any last thought before we wrap this up?
My final thought is for 2026, I just hope everybody out there can remain healthy, that you find your happiness wherever that may take you, and that that this be a better year for you than 2025 was in whatever shape or form that took.
And we're happy that you're back with us because we are here for another year of the Unscripted podcast. Duncan Giles, thank you again for joining the podcast, and we'll be back, if all goes well, next week with another edition of Lannan and Giles Unscripted. We have one ask for you as the audience. Like and subscribe to this podcast. We appreciate it. Duncan and Larry will be back soon with another episode. In the meantime, this is Unscripted.